Mars is not dead. It's just holding its breath. For decades, we were taught that the red planet is a frozen, mummified corpse of a world that died billions of years ago. We were told that water disappeared there long before the first multicellular organisms appeared on Earth, that the atmosphere was stripped away by solar wind in deep antiquity, leaving behind only a radioactive desert. But on May 15, 2021, the Chinese rover Zhurong landed in the northern hemisphere of Mars and began transmitting data that made planetary scientists turn pale. What it found beneath the layer of red dust doesn't fit the beautiful theories in textbooks. It found traces of water, but not that ancient water NASA keeps talking about. It found evidence that liquid, salty water flowed on the surface of Mars very recently. In geological terms, literally yesterday. When the ancestors of humans were already living on Earth, when our forefathers were mastering fire, streams could still have been murmuring on Mars. This discovery changes everything. If water was there so recently, it means Mars didn't die. It fell into a coma. And perhaps we were too quick to conclude that we are alone there. Today, we will unravel this detective story. We will descend into Utopia Planitia, a place that looks like a boring desert, but is actually the lid of a giant icy coffin. We will find out why the Chinese rover's radar saw structures underground that painfully resemble the permafrost of Siberia. We will understand who or what switched off Mars' magnetic field, and why the fate of our neighbor is the most terrifying warning for Earth. Buckle up. We are departing for a planet that seems to have started waking up. To understand the shock of scientists from Zhurong's data, we need to go back a bit. To the 1970s. Back then, humanity saw Mars up close for the first time thanks to the Viking missions. And it was a bitter disappointment. Science fiction writers promised us canals, jungles, or at least lichens. But the cameras showed only rocks and a pink sky. Vikings' chemical analyzers licked the soil and said, "It's sterile here. No organics, no life, no liquid water." Since then, a dogma has settled in science. Mars was warm and wet only in the Noachian period. This is the earliest epoch of its history, about 4 billion years ago. Then something happened. The planet cooled, the core stopped, the magnetic shield fell, and the sun scorched everything living. We got used to thinking that for the last 3 billion years, absolutely nothing has happened on Mars except dust storms and the fall of rare meteorites. We call this period the Amazonian era, the era of cold and dryness. All NASA rovers, Spirit, Opportunity, Curiosity, Perseverance, were looking for traces of that ancient water. They drilled rocks that are 3 or 4 billion years old, and they found them. Yes, Mars was once blue, but that was so long ago that for us today, it almost doesn't matter. It's like studying dinosaurs. Interesting, but we aren't afraid of meeting them on the street. But China went a different way. They chose a landing site for their first rover that the Americans avoided. Utopia Planitia. This is a huge lowland in the northern hemisphere, more than 3,000 kilometers in diameter. It is believed to be the bottom of an ancient ocean formed after a monstrous asteroid impact. Why did China choose this particular place? Because they weren't interested in deep antiquity. They were interested in the question, where did the water go? After. If the ocean froze, where is the ice? And if it is there, can it melt? Zhurong wasn't driving to a museum of antiquities. It was driving to a crime scene that, perhaps, hasn't cooled down yet. The Chinese rover isn't just a copy of American devices. It has its own unique eyes. And the most important tool on board became the ground-penetrating radar, capable of seeing through soil to a depth of up to 100 meters. This is the same technology as on the U-2 lunar rover, which we talked about in the last video, but adapted for Martian conditions. Zhurong started its journey south from the landing platform. It drove slowly, scanning every centimeter under its wheels. And what appeared on the screens of operators in Beijing began to raise questions in the very first weeks. The radar showed that a complex, multi-layered structure is hidden under the smooth layer of sand. It wasn't just piled-up rock, it was a layer cake of history. At a depth of 10 to 30 meters, the radar detected strange wedge-shaped structures. Imagine giant stone honeycombs hidden underground, or cracks filled with other material. Geologists call this polygonal terrain. If you fly to Yakutia or Antarctica on Earth, you will see the same thing. When soil saturated with water freezes, it expands and cracks. Then in summer, the ice melts a little. Sand and water get into the cracks. And in winter, everything freezes again and tears the Earth even more. Over thousands of years, characteristic geometric patterns form, polygons. The presence of such polygons beneath the surface of Mars says only one thing. There was a lot of water here, and this water froze and melted, froze and melted, cycle after cycle. But the scariest thing for old theories was where these layers are located. They lie too high. They are covered only by a thin layer of fresh sand. Radiocarbon dating cannot be done on Mars, but by the number of craters on top, geologists can estimate the age of the surface. And the age estimates of these water structures were shocking. We weren't talking about billions of years. We were talking about a period from 3 billion to, attention, 400,000 years ago. 400,000 years. By cosmic standards, this is a split second. This is a time when human evolution was already in full swing on Earth. And at the same time, turbulent processes involving liquid water were happening on dead Mars. How is this possible? After all, we know that the pressure on Mars today is so low that water there instantly boils and evaporates even at 0 degrees. Liquid water on the surface is physically impossible in current conditions. So, the conditions were different. Very recently, this discovery breaks the whole picture of a stable, dead world. It tells us that the climate of Mars is not a straight line going down to the cold. It's a cardiogram. It's a swing. And someone is pushing this swing with monstrous force. To understand where the water came from 400,000 years ago, we need to look not under our feet, but at the sky. On Earth, we have a huge moon. It works as a stabilizer. It keeps the axis of rotation of our planet at an angle of 23.5 degrees. This tilt gives us the change of seasons, but it is stable. Earth doesn't nod too much. Mars has no big moon. Its satellites, Phobos and Deimos, are tiny potatoes that cannot hold the planet. Therefore, Mars in its rotation behaves like a drunk spinning top. Its axis of tilt changes chaotically. Sometimes it stands almost straight. And then eternal winter reigns on the planet. The atmosphere freezes and falls as snow at the poles. But sometimes, under the influence of Jupiter's gravity, Mars tilts very strongly, up to 45 and even 60 degrees. When this happens, the poles turn directly to the sun. Polar caps, consisting of ice and carbon dioxide, begin to melt. Trillions of tons of gas evaporate. The atmosphere becomes denser many times over. Pressure rises. The greenhouse effect heats up the planet. And suddenly, the dead desert comes alive. Ice that has lain for billions of years in the middle latitudes, in that very Utopia Planitia, begins to melt. Zhurong's data confirm the Great Climate Instability theory. Those polygons and cracks found by the radar are traces of the last global warming on Mars. Water flowed there not because the planet was young, but because the planet tilted. This means that Mars is not dead for good. It is in a deep freeze phase. But this cycle will end, and one day Mars will turn to the Sun again, and streams of mud and water will flow on its surface once more. But here, a second riddle arises, even darker. Zhurong's radar saw not only traces of freezing, it saw layers that resemble the consequences of catastrophic floods. Not slow melting, but a sudden breakthrough. Where could the energy for such a sharp release come from? And where did all this water go afterward? After all, if it just froze, we should have found its reserves. But scanners show that there is less water in the soil than calculated. Someone is stealing water from Mars. We have reached the middle of our investigation. We know that water was there recently. We know that the Martian climate jumps. But there is one fundamental problem that keeps scientists awake at night. This is the volume problem. Utopia Planitia is a giant basin. If filled with water, it would be a sea the size of half the Arctic Ocean. Geological data says there was a lot of water there. But now the atmosphere of Mars is 100 times thinner than Earth's. Where did all these molecules go? There are two versions. The first, water went underground and froze. And Zhurong's radar data partially confirms this. But the second option is much scarier. Water went into space, and this process continues right now. Mars is losing its blood. Every second, the solar wind blows tons of oxygen and hydrogen off the planet. Why doesn't Earth lose water? Because we have a magnetic field. It is an invisible shield that deflects solar particles. Mars doesn't have this shield. Or rather, it did, but it disappeared. And here the Chinese mission data begins to echo what we learned about the Moon. Remember the impact that almost destroyed the Moon? Well, Mars seems to have fallen victim to an even more brutal attack. Utopia Planitia, where the Chinese rover sits, is the trace of an impact. It is a crater, the largest confirmed crater in the solar system. Something hit Mars with such force that it pierced the crust and possibly damaged the mechanism for generating the magnetic field in the core. Scientists call this planet murder. Imagine a civilization, even a microbial one, living in the ocean. And suddenly, a body the size of Pluto falls from the sky. The shockwave passes through the planet. The core, which worked like a dynamo, loses its rhythm. The magnetic field weakens, and a slow agony begins. The solar wind begins, layer by layer, to strip away the atmosphere. Oceans boil. Water tries to hide. It seeps into cracks, goes deep, freezes, hides under layers of sand. What Zhurong found are the last surviving remnants of that great ocean. It is water trying to survive underground. But the most interesting thing in Zhurong's data is the minerals. The rover's spectrometers found hydrated sulfates and silica. These substances form only in the presence of liquid water. But more importantly, they form a hard crust. This crust is like cement, and it plays a dual role. On the one hand, it seals moisture below, preventing it from evaporating. On the other hand, it makes the surface of Mars deceptive. We look from satellites and see dry sand, but this is just camouflage. The Chinese rover is currently driving on the roof of a huge reservoir. Under its wheels, at a depth of just a few meters, there may be ice mixed with salt. And salt is antifreeze. Salty water doesn't freeze even at -20 or -30 degrees. This opens the door to the boldest and most frightening hypothesis, which we will discuss in the second part of the video. Could it be that down there, in these salty pockets, right now, someone is living? And if water was on the surface only 400,000 years ago, does this mean that life didn't have time to die? Maybe it just moved? We are used to looking for fossils, bones, bacterial mats, ancient chemistry. But what if we are looking for dead bodies in a house where the tenants just went down to the basement? We are approaching the most dangerous conclusion. If Mars is capable of switching on and switching off conditions for life due to fluctuations in its axis, then now it is simply in a sleep phase. And those structures found by Zhurong are time capsules waiting for the next spring. But are we ready to open these capsules? After all, if life has been preserved there, it survived in conditions of monstrous radiation and toxic salts. This must be life that has learned to wait and fight. And meeting it could be a surprise for humanity that we are not ready for. In the second part of the video, we will dive into the biological mysteries of these finds. We will find out why Zhurong's findings are forcing Elon Musk and the China National Space Administration to revise colonization plans. We will talk about why drilling Martian ice could be deadly dangerous. And most importantly, we will answer the question, why the fate of Mars is a mirror of Earth's possible future, and how soon our own magnetic shield might crack. Let's pause for a moment and consider what these dry, boring chemical terms actually mean. Hydrated sulfates and silica, which the Chinese rover found. To the average person, these are just names from an 8th grade chemistry textbook, meaningless words. But to an astrobiologist, this is a treasure map. These minerals aren't just rocks. They are a shell, a sarcophagus, perfect armor. Data from Zhurong's spectrometers show that the sand in Utopia Planitia is covered by a hard crust that geologists call duricrust. It's a sort of natural cement, Martian-made concrete. It forms when salty water rises from the depths to the surface through capillaries, evaporates under the weak sun, and the remaining salt glues the sand grains together tight. This crust is incredibly strong. Remember how hard it is to break caked salt? But its main property isn't its hardness. It acts as a perfect thermal insulator and radiation shield. It doesn't let precious moisture escape from the depths, sealing it like a cork in a bottle, and protects what lies beneath from deadly UV rays and cosmic radiation that sterilizes the surface. We're used to thinking of radiation on Mars as the ultimate killer, the ruthless executioner of all living things. But physics is unrelenting. A layer of soil just a couple of meters thick reduces the radiation dose to a completely acceptable level. And if there's also a dense crust of sulfates on top, working like a lead apron in an X-ray room, then underneath it, an environment is created that can be safely called a biological bunker. And here we come to the most important part, the part that makes scientists hold their breath. If water was there 400,000 years ago, and it was salty, it didn't disappear without a trace. It couldn't just evaporate into nowhere. Salty water, or in scientific terms, brine, possesses an amazing, almost magical property. It absorbs moisture right out of the air. This process is called hygroscopicity. Even in the current dry-as-a-bone and thin atmosphere of Mars, microscopic films of liquid water can exist under this crust. Not ice, not steam, liquid, right now, at this very second, as you listen to these words. On Earth, there are extremophile organisms that live in exactly these kinds of seemingly unbearable conditions. In the Atacama Desert in Chile, the driest place on our planet where it hasn't rained for centuries, bacteria live inside salt crystals. They don't die. They fall into a deep sleep, into suspended animation, for hundreds and thousands of years, waiting for the humidity to rise just a little bit. When that happens, they wake up, kickstart their metabolism, divide their cells, repair their radiation-damaged DNA, and go back to sleep until better times. This is life on the brink of death, life in extreme slow motion. Zhurong's findings tell us straight up, Mars is a giant Atacama. It's not a dead rock, it's a dormant ecosystem. If life ever arose there, and the early Martian ocean had all the conditions for it, even better than on early Earth, then it didn't need to die when the planet dried up and cooled down. It just needed to go underground, to hide under the sulfate crust. And wait, 400,000 years for a bacterium in suspended animation is nothing. It's a blink of an eye. Here on Earth, we've revived bacteria extracted from amber or permafrost that were millions of years old. This implies a terrifying thing. The Chinese rover might be driving right over the heads of the locals. We look for Martians by staring into deep space, building giant antennas to catch radio signals from distant civilizations. Meanwhile, Martians might be sleeping right under the metal wheels of our rovers, protected by a layer of sulfates that we so carelessly and rudely plan to drill through. And this brings us to an even more shocking fact that was revealed in parallel with the Zhurong mission, one that changes the picture completely. Mars isn't just wet on the inside, it's also warm. For a long time in planetary science, it was considered an axiom that Mars is as hopelessly dead geologically as it is biologically, that its volcanoes are extinct monuments of deep antiquity, having cooled down billions of years ago. The great Olympus Mons, the tallest volcano in the solar system standing 26 kilometers high, was perceived by us as a granite tombstone of past activity. We thought the core of Mars had completely solidified, turning into a cold iron ball. But while Zhurong was digging sand in Utopia Planitia, orbiters detected something strange and inexplicable in a neighboring region, Elysium Planitia. There, among ancient lava fields, traces of fresh volcanic ash and dark deposits were found that are only about 50,000 years old. Think about that number. 50,000 years. By planetary geological standards, that happened this morning over breakfast. This means that somewhere deep beneath the thick crust of Mars, hot magma is still flowing. The planet's heart hasn't stopped completely. It's beating, perhaps rarely, perhaps with arrhythmia, but it is alive. Now put these two facts together into a single picture. Fact 1 from Zhurong: there is water ice and possibly liquid brines beneath the surface. Fact 2: there are sources of magmatic heat beneath the surface. What happens in physics when water meets magma? Hydrothermal vents form, hot springs, geysers. On Earth, it is in exactly these places, at the bottom of black oceans, in mid-ocean ridge zones, that life boils. There, in total darkness, without sunlight, entire ecosystems thrive, feeding on chemical energy. These are perfect incubators. If beneath Utopia Planitia or Elysium, there are zones where internal heat melts deep ice, then huge underground lakes with comfortable, almost room temperatures could exist there. Not cold, salty films where life barely flickers, but full-fledged warm oases filled with water. We don't see them from orbit because they are hidden by kilometers of stone. Zhurong's radar doesn't reach that deep, but all indirect signs, all geological clues, point to the fact that Mars might be like a giant chocolate egg. A hard, cold, lifeless shell on the outside, and a warm, wet, living environment on the inside. This discovery radically changes our attitude toward colonization and terraforming. Before, we thought we were flying to an empty, sterile rock that could be rebuilt however we liked, without fear of damaging anything. Elon Musk seriously proposed dropping series of thermonuclear bombs on the Martian polar caps to melt the ice and create an atmosphere. But now we understand. This could be an act of planetary genocide. If there is a biosphere there, even one hidden deep below, then any rough intervention of ours, any nuclear explosion, could destroy it. Or, what's even scarier, Wake up something we aren't ready to face. We love watching Hollywood movies about alien invasions, but the real threat to humanity doesn't look like an armada of shiny ships with lasers. It looks like a simple DNA or RNA chain invisible to the naked eye. If Martian life exists, and it hid underground to escape catastrophe, then it went through a hellish school of survival. Over millions of years of evolution in isolation, it became the ultimate survivalist. It is resistant to monstrous doses of radiation that would kill a human in a second. It withstands temperature swings from -100 to plus. It knows how to live in a toxic environment of perchlorates, poisonous salts of perchloric acid that permeate the entire Martian soil. What will happen if we humans arrive there with our drilling rigs? What if we start drilling deep boreholes to extract water for rocket fuel production and accidentally bring these organisms to the surface? To them, our warm, moist living modules filled with tasty organics will be paradise. A real all-you-can-eat buffet after millions of years of starvation. Our immune system has never in evolutionary history encountered anything like this. We don't know how Martian biology interacts with Earth biology. Are our proteins food to them or poison? This is called backward contamination. The risk of bringing a pathogen to Earth or growing one on Mars, against which we have no medicine, no vaccine, no natural defense. Zhurong showed us that the environment for preserving such pathogens is ideal. Polygonal structures full of ice and protected by an impermeable crust are natural refrigerators, cryochambers, where ancient alien biology can be stored forever, awaiting its hour. Both China and the United States are currently actively planning Mars sample return missions. This is the scientific race of the century, comparable to the moon landing. But new data about recent water forces a revision of all biosafety protocols. The capsule with Martian soil that will arrive on Earth in 10 to 15 years must be guarded better than the president's nuclear button, because inside it might not just be red dust and rocks. Inside might be dormant life that has waited for its chance for 400,000 years. And we are about to open that door with our own hands. But let's return to Earth for a minute. Why is the story of distant Mars so important to us, ordinary people who might never leave the bounds of our home planet and will only look at the stars from a balcony? Because Mars is our mirror. It is our possible future. Looking at the data transmitted by Zhurong, we see an apocalypse scenario that has already been written and played out in our solar system. We said at the beginning that Mars lost its dense atmosphere and oceans due to the shutdown of its global magnetic field. Scientists still argue furiously about why exactly this happened. Was it a giant asteroid impact that knocked the core's settings off? Or did the core simply cool down due to the planet's small size? But the fact remains, the invisible shield fell, and life, or the conditions for it, was driven into a deep, dark dungeon. Right now, while we go about our daily worries, Earth's magnetic field is weakening. This is a scientific fact. Over the last 200 years of observation, its intensity has dropped by about 10 to 15%. In the South Atlantic region, between Africa and South America, a giant magnetic anomaly has formed, a breach in the armor, where protection is so weak that satellites often fail when flying over this zone due to cosmic particle strikes. The North Magnetic Pole, which was relatively stable for centuries, has now broken loose and is racing toward Siberia at unprecedented speed. We are standing on the threshold of a geomagnetic reversal, a flip of the magnetic poles. This, of course, does not mean that Earth will turn into a dry and cold Mars tomorrow. Our planet has more mass, we have a more active and hotter core, we have plate tectonics. But the process of planetary defense degradation is a reality that cannot be ignored. Mars shows us the final, terminal stage of this process. It shows without embellishment what happens to a blooming world when it is left one-on-one with its star. The sun is not just a gentle source of light and heat that gives life to plants. It is a giant thermonuclear reactor that wants to kill us. The solar wind is a stream of high-energy particles that works like sandpaper, stripping the planet's atmosphere layer by layer. The only thing saving us from this fate is the invisible field lines of the magnetic field generated by the rotation of liquid iron in the center of the Earth. On Mars, we see scars from what happens when these lines disappear. Dried-up oceans turned into salt deserts, an atmosphere torn to shreds, life driven into stone, into eternal darkness. Zhurong's findings in Utopia Planitia are a grim reminder of the fragility of our own oasis. We live on the thin crust of a cooling planet, protected by an invisible bubble that isn't eternal. And the fact that we found water on Mars fills us not only with hope for discovering extraterrestrial life, but also with primal fear. Hope that life is incredibly resilient and capable of adapting to hell. And fear of how easily and quickly an entire planet can turn from a paradise into an icy crypt. In the coming decades, Mars will cease to be just an object for telescopes. It will become the arena of a new, brutal battle. And the Chinese rover's data is, in essence, the first strategic intelligence in this coming war. The question is blunt: who will get to these polygonal structures with water first? Who will be the first to sink a drill into Utopia Planitia? Water in space isn't just a liquid for drinking. Water is the oil of the space age. It is hydrogen and oxygen. It is the most efficient rocket fuel. Whoever controls the water sources on Mars, whoever owns the taps of Utopia Planitia and places like it, will control the logistics of the entire solar system. Mars will become a gas station, a hub, a springboard for a jump to the asteroid belt and beyond, to the moons of Jupiter and Saturn. China has already officially announced plans to build a permanent manned base at the South Pole or in the area of ice deposits. NASA, in response, is accelerating its Artemis program and preparing manned flights to Mars in the 30s. We are seeing the formation of space coalitions. This is no longer just science for the sake of satisfying curiosity. This is a race for the right to be the first species to become truly interplanetary. It is a race for survival and dominance. But are we morally ready for this? Have we matured as a civilization for such a step? We have barely learned, and poorly at that, to take care of our own home. We have polluted Earth with plastic, chemicals, and exhaust. We are changing the climate of our planet without understanding the consequences. Now we stand on the threshold of a new world, clean, untouched, and pristine, which has slept for billions of years in silence. Do we have the right to drill its glaciers, change its climate, build factories and cities? If Zhurong is right, and Mars is merely slumbering, then our intervention is an invasion. We aren't arriving as colonists on empty land. We are arriving as invaders in someone else's home where the owners are simply asleep. The irony of fate may lie in the fact that, striving to save humanity and create a backup planet in case of catastrophe on Earth, we might destroy with our own hands a unique biosphere that is possibly our distant relative. After all, there is the scientific theory of panspermia, which says that life on Earth could have been brought specifically from Mars billions of years ago, on meteorites knocked out by the very ancient impacts that destroyed the Martian oceans. In fragments of Martian rocks falling to Earth, we find organic molecules. Maybe we aren't visiting. Maybe we are flying home, to our origins, to the homeland of our ancestors. But this house has long been boarded up. The windows are broken, and something we have forgotten lurks in the basement. The Chinese rover Zhurong, this little heroic machine on 6 wheels looking like a beetle, now stands somewhere in the middle of the endless red desert. It has traveled a huge path. It exceeded its warranty service life. Its mechanisms are worn by sand. It is covered with a layer of dust, and its solar panels are working worse and worse. Soon the harsh Martian winter will come. The temperature will drop to critical levels, and it might fall asleep forever, becoming another monument to human perseverance on an alien planet. But what it managed to tell us, those gigabytes of data that flew through millions of kilometers of void, can no longer be forgotten. This knowledge changed everything. Mars is not dead. It is waiting. It remembers the sound of water, the splashing of waves, and the warmth of its inner core. It keeps within its deep bowels secrets that can overturn not only biology and geology, but also our philosophical understanding of life's place in the universe. We are no longer alone, even if our neighbors are just primitive bacteria sleeping in salt crystals. For centuries, we looked at the red dot in the sky and saw the past of the solar system. Now, thanks to Zhurong, we look at it and see an alternative present. Alive, dynamic, dangerous, and most importantly, we see in Mars a dire warning for our own future. The water is gone. The magnetic shield has fallen. The planet went silent and turned into a desert. This is a scenario that the universe plays out without pity, without sentiment, and without exception. Humanity has received the signal. Mars is inhabited, or was inhabited very recently, by cosmic clocks. The water is there. The resources for life and expansion are there. But death is also there, patiently waiting for careless and arrogant travelers. The next step is ours. We must decide. Do we fly there as wise explorers respecting alien life, or as greedy conquistadors ready for anything for the sake of resources? And while we here on Earth make this fateful decision, our planet continues to spin, and its magnetic field continues to weaken, reminding us that time is not infinite. But about what exactly is happening to our own planet's core right now, why scientists are detecting strange deep vibrations, and how the shift of Earth's core might be connected to cosmic cycles, we will talk about in the next, even more terrifying video. Because the mystery hidden right beneath our feet might turn out to be scarier and closer than any cosmic threat. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the truth that the planet itself is hiding from us. Space is closer than it seems, and the abyss is even closer.